Hello, viewers, and welcome to Viewpoint with Kenneth Ogozie. Thank you so much for joining us. Viewpoint, basically, it's a platform where we showcase this and celebrate members of the African diaspora, Africans living in the homeland, and of course, persons of African descent who are, excelling in their chosen careers, their professions, and of course, business. This show basically would definitely bring individuals for them to tell their stories and, in their authentic voices. And of course, inspire and motivate other individuals who are looking to break into these careers or want to learn one or two lessons about life and how you could really position yourself and prepare yourself for the journey, how you can overcome barriers and challenges, and how you can succeed amidst all the challenges which we face as Africans in the diaspora, in the homeland, or persons of African descent. So today, I do have with me a special guest. This is an individual who has really made a lot of strides in terms of international development. He's a member of the African diaspora, even though presently he's resident in the homeland. But he's sort of a little bit like myself, who Kenneth Ogozie, who has really, would I say, call myself a global citizen based on the fact that I have lived in so many countries. I think this promises to really be a very exciting interview or conversation, if I might use that word. And I think for our audience, there are a lot of things for you to learn in terms of listening to his stories, listening to all the wonderful things he's done. And, we can talk about that. So I'm really excited to have him here. So without much ado, I would like to welcome Monsieur Karis Musako. Karis is based in Congo, and he's a senior program officer with the UK Department of Foreign Development. I hope I got that right, but I think I will let Karis speak about that. So welcome to Viewpoint with Kenneth Ogozie. Karis.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kenneth. I'm very honored and pleased to have been invited to Viewpoint, this new initiative, and I congratulate you for your many initiatives that you launch and the efforts you put into inspiring others and raising the voice of Africans, be it in Africa or in the diaspora.
Thank you so much, Karis. And I think it's actually a pleasure and honor to really have you on the show. And I also have to congratulate you because you do have an extensive CV resume, which I think we also want to dig into some of those because, like I always say, nothing happens by accident. So you have pretty much like utilized a strategy. You have pretty much sat down and looked at your strengths and all of that, and then sort of leveraged on some of those things, which has actually got you to where you are. So I think we are really honored and I am humbled to have you here on Viewpoint. And I'm sure our viewers are also really interested and excited to hear about your journey. But, let's kick off, Karis. Tell us, who is Karis? Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do and, how you do it.
Thank you very much. So as I said, I'm very honored to be here. I don't think I'm extraordinary like the way you presented me. It's as if I'm a special person who broke all the limits and so on. No, I think I managed to take the opportunities that were presented to me and to make the most of it. But I'm far from having reached my objectives, my goals. So yeah, as you rightly said, my name is Karis Musako. I'm originally from the DRC, or I'm from the DRC, Congo. And I was actually born in Cameroon since my parents were there for their studies. And then later they went to Germany. So when I was 1 year and a half, 2 years, we went to Germany. My parents, my big brother and me, where they continued their studies, basically. My father got a scholarship in Germany, and yeah, my mother as well. So they spent 7 years, I think, 7, 8 years in Germany. So I basically spent my whole childhood in Germany, and I would say this is the start of a strand that goes through my my biography, it's changed. So I've changed many environments, many work environments as well, and this has been with me since my early years. So yeah, I went to Germany. I finished my basic school there, and when I was around 10, I think, or 9, we went back to the Congo. I mean, for me, it was the first time to be in the Congo, and we spent 3 years in Congo. And I have to mention perhaps here that my godfather is German, and when we went back to Congo, the early years in Congo, it's also coincided with the years where the DRC, or at that time it was called Zaire, went through a phase of political instability, which led to also schools being closed, etc. So my godfather, who's German, suggested to my parents that my brothers and me went back to Germany to finish our school there. So this happened. So when I was 12 or 13, we went back to Germany. I graduated in Germany. I mean, finished high school in Germany. And then I was faced with a decision, like, what do I do? I have a German, what they call Abitur in my pocket. So I want to go to university. What do I want to do? In which area I want to which area I want to go? And since I was already very much interested in politics and to see how our environment works, how our environment is regulated, the first choice for me was to go into law studies. And at that time, I heard about an opportunity which was a double degree between a university in Germany, in Cologne, and in La Sorbonne in Paris. So it was 2 years of studies in German and 2 years of studies in France, with a double degree in law, which was relatively unique at that time. And it was quite selective. So they took 60 students, 30 Germans and 30 French students into this program. So I went through the selection process and was lucky to be selected. And I was the only selected from the German side. So I was the only black guy in the course. So that's also something that happened to me a lot. Like when I grew up in Germany, also I was the only black guy in the whole school and the whole village as well. And yeah, I had always a bit this status of the special, the unique person, because of the color of my skin and my background. So yeah, I did the 2 years in Germany studies, and then I went to France, we finished in France, had my double degree in law, and then was faced again with the choice: do you want to continue in a law career, become a lawyer or a judge or something, or do something else? And that time, I mean, I had always also, although I spent much of my life up to then abroad. Since my parents stayed in the Congo during all this time, the links to Africa, to the Congo, were always there, and facing also the poverty when going back on vacations in the country. So this desire to do something for my country, for Africa, was always there. So at that point, and the interest also to go into development was very strong. So after this master degree, I decided to go more into the direction of development. But coming from law, there's no direct route into development studies. And at that time in France, it was not very known. You didn't have a master's degree focusing exclusively on development studies. So I was accepted in a degree called Diplomacy and Negotiations, which had a few courses on development. So I did this master's degree in France, finished, and applied for jobs. At the end, I did at the end of my studies, I did how you call it, an internship with UNDP in the Congo, a 3-month internship. So it was my first kind of interaction, real interaction with the development world. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy to get into the UN. You have to have at least like 2-3 years of work experience, which I didn't have as I came fresh from university. And yeah, and then I started sending out CVs to find a job. And I was invited to an assessment center with the International Committee of the Red Cross, the Geneva-based international humanitarian law organization. And yeah, and I was again lucky enough to be taken, to be recruited into this organization. And my first mission was in Sudan, in Darfur, in the midst of the conflict. So as most of you know, the ICRC, its mandate is to monitor the respect of the international humanitarian law during international conflicts, but also internal conflicts. So whenever there's a conflict anywhere in the world, the ICRC has to be there and to make sure that the civilians are protected, that the rules of the war, as they call it, are respected by all parties and so on. And yeah, and I was a protection officer. I was employed as a protection. No, they used to call it protection delegate. So I had a mandate from the ICRC to work as a protection delegate to make sure that the different parties to the conflict behaved more or less. This was my kind of the first exposure into humanitarian and kind of development arena, but it was more humanitarian since it was really during the war and working with people who are directly affected by the war. So yeah, I was in Sudan, in Darfur, 1 year. Then my second mission was still with the ICRC, but in Sri Lanka. I spent a year or so there, and then went back to the DRC, where I managed to get a position with the UNDP at that time. Spent 2 years or so with UNDP. Actually, I think I will try to accelerate my story, because if I go really into detail, we'll spend half an hour.
Wow, who is this guy? You know, and for those who don't know, Karis and I were, you know, we were classmates at the London School of Economics, where in the UK, where we both studied social policy and development. And it's interesting how I've known Karis for maybe like 8 years or 9 years. And trust me, I didn't know he was this guy is loaded, and I'm just listening to him and my mind is blown away. Like, you know, but, you know, I'll let you finish up. I don't want to burst the whole thing, but, you know, keep going. That's okay. I'm sure like viewers will probably actually understand or enjoy thinking about the career trajectory and how you've managed to connect all these pieces to build you to become who you are. So I'll let you continue, Karis.
Yeah, but I'll still try to speed up a bit and not go into all these details. So yeah, went back to DRC after my work with the ICRC, where I joined for the first time UNDP as a poverty analyst or project analyst, but working on poverty issues. This I did for 2 years, 1 year and a half or so. And then I applied for, because I felt that I didn't have kind of the ideological background, like the study background, to really make my way in the development sector. So I was looking for another master's degree, ideally in the English-speaking country, in the UK. Yeah. As many of you know, kind of UK is at the forefront of development thinking in the world. So they have a lot of very good universities, and there's a scholarship scheme called the Chevening Scholarship, which is a scholarship that is offered by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office
Yeah.
for students all over the world who have a potential, leadership potential, and who can demonstrate or kind of convince them that they will be able to have a positive impact in the environment later.
Absolutely.
So it's a postgraduate scholarship for to do 1 year in the UK. So I applied, and yeah, I was accepted. So that's how I then came to the UK, to the London School of Economics, where I met Kenneth, and yeah, we were in the same degree, social policy and development. And yeah, it was a very good time, very intense time. I mean, the LSE, as many of you know, is one of the best and renowned universities on development, international studies in the world. So it was really elevating to be surrounded by all these bright and talented minds. So it was a beautiful experience. Yeah, this I did. We graduated, I think, in end of 2011, November, December 2011, and yeah, and then with my degree in my pocket again, looking for a job. So yeah, I wanted to continue in international organizations, UN or the African Development Bank. Tried African Development Bank, had a few contacts, but this didn't work out. And then I was lucky again to be taken into the Young Professional Program, or they call it Junior Professional Officer Program of the UN. And to work as a coordination analyst for 3 years in Algeria, in Algiers, with the Office of the UN Resident Coordinator. Also a very nice experience. So spending 3 years in Algeria, working in the UN coordination, came back at the end, back to the Congo, and this was a phase where it was a bit low. I would say a low phase in my life where I struggled to actually get a job. So although I had this large experience working in humanitarian sector, having international experience, but yeah, I didn't find a job. Being invited for many interviews and so on, but it didn't click. So yeah, it was tough. Spent 1 year and a half, kind of unemployed, looking for a job, but then finally got something in working with an NGO in South Sudan. Again, in the humanitarian protection sector. And after that, or while there, I wanted to get back to the DRC because my family actually stayed in the DRC, my wife and kids, where I was deployed in South Sudan. Yeah. So I came across an advertisement of a position as a program manager for the FCO, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the UK government and the UK embassy in Kinshasa, to manage a program covering the Great Lakes region, meaning DRC, Rwanda, and Burundi. So yeah, I got the job. Spent 1 year and a half with them. Unfortunately, the position was cancelled, but luckily they opened a new position, but this time with DFID. Okay. It's the development agency of the UK government in Kinshasa as well. So yeah, I was unemployed for 3 months, but applied for this new position, which was a higher position as a senior program manager in 2018. And yeah, I got this position. So since 2018 now, end of 2018, November 2018, I'm a senior program manager for DFID. As most of you must probably know, DFID has merged with the FCO, with the Foreign Office, to become the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. So it's now called FCDO. So DFID doesn't exist, the FCO doesn't exist. It's a new organization. We are in a merger process right now. It's a relatively new thing. I think it started in September last year. So as you can imagine, to merge 2 ministries is not easy. So there's a whole change process ongoing. But yeah, we are now with this new organization, and I cover areas of conflict and governance, actually conflict and governance thematics in the DRC. So that's a bit my story.
Wow, wow, that's that's commendable, Karis. I think you've really done well, and I think you're actually working in a very important area, which is international development, because, it's for a good cause, humanity and providing support. And I think, in terms of my my journey, I have met a lot of, Africans in diaspora, even in the homeland, who typically will talk about, how do I break into these careers? What are some of the things that I should be thinking about? What's the mindset? Because we know it's very competitive. I mean, I have a master's in social policy and development, and today I run my own international trade business, which it's different in a way, but it is similar, because at the end of the day, my focus on Africa trade is really to see how we can provide sustainable employment for people in Africa, people in the motherland, and of course, even in diaspora, how can I support? So it is still for a good cause. But notwithstanding, I think you have done a lot of very challenging, you've taken on a lot of challenging positions, working in some of these fragile states and, war-torn countries, and really putting yourself at risk. That is very inspiring. And I think you're making a huge impact. So what would you say to me is, has been your motivation to stay in international development sphere? For crying out loud, you stayed 1.5 years at home, like unemployed. Most people probably switch careers. There are so many other jobs with your level of skills you would have found like this. But you said to yourself, you know what, I want to focus on international development. This is my cause. This is what I want. What is the motivation? What's the inspiration behind these careers?
I think the big motivation is really to help people to get out of poverty. I mean, we have a blessed continent with so many resources, so many potential, but people live in extreme poverty, or the majority of people, especially in DRC. I mean, we have one of the highest poverty rates in Africa and in the world. I think studies are showing that by 2050 or so, the largest numbers of poor in the world will live in 2 countries, in Nigeria and the DRC. So yeah, we have to do something. So yeah, people sometimes are surprised, like with your education, with your experience, the fact that I navigate very well in Europe, it would have been easy for me to stay there and to live kind of a more or less comfortable life, and forget about Africa, or go there partially. But I don't know. There was something in me that drew me back to Africa every time. Actually, there's a funny story. When I went 2 years ago, I went for leave. For holidays to Germany, and at the airport, how do you call it? The officer who checks your yeah. He looked at my CV, my passport and the different visas, and he was like, and I spoke with him in German. So first he was a bit surprised to hear me speak German, and then he, yeah, and at the end he asked me like, why did you leave Germany? Why didn't you stay here? And I was like, it's my calling is to go back to Africa. So even this guy who normally wants people not to stay in Germany was surprised that I didn't stay in Germany.
Right? Because you have
come back to us.
Right?
So yeah, no, it's difficult. Sometimes you have a calling, a feeling, inside feeling that you want to do something different, and yeah, you want to help your environment. You want to lift. Be a force that contributes to lifting people out of poverty, even if it's only your immediate environment. So I'm lucky to be able to work for the UK government and to manage UK funds in favor of my country and of stimulating policies that should help my people. But I actually think that we should, like people like you and me who have been in both worlds, I would say that we should constitute a bridge, a bridge between the West and Africa. I mean, people say that Africa is the future, also in terms of the demography and so on. Europe, North America are becoming old, and they will rely on African manpower and so on, and even on African resources. Sorry. So we who have experienced both worlds, we can have a bridge. I mean, can play the role as a bridge between two. And I really like the work you're doing in kind of generating investments into Africa and trade, because this is what Africa actually needs. I mean, trade, facilitate trade, and not necessarily aid. But I mean, but that's another story.
Yes, I agree. And I think you make great points there, Karis. And, I think we seem to have a consensus around the fact that we both share a passion in terms of, promoting the continent. I mean, of course, you are like a foot soldier because you are right there in the continent. You are in the heat of the thing. So you're the brave person. You're brave, and that takes a lot of courage, and you are making impact. So no matter how humble you try to be or downplay your achievement, I think you've done a lot, and you are still doing a lot. And you don't know how much your work is really impacting the lives of people, in the continent, or some of these other countries you've worked in, even as far as Sri Lanka. So, kudos to you. And it's always a pleasure listening to these sort of stories. And I'm sure a lot of, viewers, audience out there who are watching this or listening to this can actually see why it is important to do something that makes you happy, something that gives you some sense of contentment, because otherwise it becomes really challenging. I say to people, work on its own is challenging, but if you find what you like, if you find what really makes you wake up every day, or what makes you get back home every day and feel like, you know what, I have created an impact today, I have done something great to humanity or serve a cause, whatever it is, then you are on that, path towards having some level of fulfillment and happiness. But let's take it back a little bit to Germany now. You did speak about your experiences always being that person, that person in the midst of, other people who probably don't look or speak like you. I have experienced that as well, but, that's my stories for another day. You are the guest here, and it's really great to hear. How did you navigate that? How did you, I don't want to say how did you feel about that, because sometimes feelings are certain things that it gets clearer over the years, and sometimes you don't even know how you felt. But how did you navigate that whole experience of being the only African or Black person in those spaces?
So that was actually looking back, it was a great school of life, I would say, because I had to adapt myself, and that is also, I would say, some kind of how you say in English, reproche, like where I say that our African diaspora can do better, because I don't know, like how is it for the Nigerian diaspora, but the Congolese diaspora, when they're in those Western countries, they stay in a silo, like they're just within themselves, and they're not open enough to the culture and the country where they live. Integration, yeah, it's a question of integration. Yeah. So me, in an early age, I grew up there. I was a small child, so the integration was natural. So I learned to speak German at a very young age. But actually, at home we spoke French with my parents, and I went also to a French school the first 7 years. But outside, with the kids outside, it was German. So I think the people used to say that Germans are racist, are not very welcoming and things like that. But I didn't feel that. I didn't make this experience. My experience was completely opposite to that. So I was always well accepted. Perhaps at the beginning, people who don't know you, they kind of tend to be a bit suspicious. Black person, what you don't know.
Stereotypes that come.
Yeah, stereotypes, and you're afraid of what you don't know. But when I started talking and they hear me speak a very good German without accent and so on, it relaxes them. So it actually changed from being afraid to being curious. So, oh man, how it comes that you speak so well German and so on. And then it was more than kind of an advantage on my side because they felt that I was like them and I was black. So it was very curious, strange for them. And the animosity turned in kind of not admiration, but like positive curiosity. So I had actually a very good experience in Germany. And I felt very much accepted and integrated. But I mean, you have always racists or people who reject you because of your skin color and so on, who don't want to know you. But I mean, you find a way to navigate within this environment. You just have to be open. Be open. Try to integrate yourself. Learn the environment, how it functions, and normally you're fine in Europe.
I see. I love. So one of the things we push for, so personally as an individual, and of course on Viewpoint with this show, is positivity. I understand the fact that we Africans in diaspora in the continent or persons of African descent, we face challenges. There are these barriers with discrimination and all of that. But I still think that at the end of the day, we still have to approach things from a positive mindset in terms of how do we position ourselves to harness better opportunities amidst all these barriers. What is the best ways to arm ourselves to be able to really stand out no matter how the society or the environment tries to push us down. And your story is a very good example. You had that mindset that this might exist around me, but that's not going to be my focus, and see how it's panning out for you. Because these conversations get really tricky. Sometimes, some people would say to you that, oh, you are just undermining, the issues people are facing. I'm like, well, at the end of the day, we respect individual stories. Everyone has their stories, and I don't think anyone carries less weight than the other. But one thing I think it's always a good end point is, how can we turn these things to positivity? How can we stay positive? How can we do some bit of introspection on what are my key strengths and how can I rise up above amidst all of this? And that's what you've been doing. But, I want to also touch on something. So right now, Karis speaks English, he speaks French, he speaks German, and he speaks, what other language do you speak, Karis?
Lingala, like local
Lingala.
languages
Lingala.
in Congo. Yeah.
So Lingala, that is amazing. So in terms of your experiences globally, how much has this multilingualism helped you, like navigate your world?
Yeah, I mean, languages are crucial to as a tool of integration wherever you are. I mean, without my English, I wouldn't be working for the UK government now. And also for the UN, you have to have at least 2 languages, I think, French and English. Yeah. So yeah, no, languages are crucial, at the basis, and we are now in a world, where since it's even more a global village, where you really have to invest in it. Also from very early on. I mean, I was lucky to grow up in an environment, I mean, in Germany, but still going to a French school and speaking French at home. So growing up basically with two languages. I added English and I feel like I should speak a 4th language to be really kind of a citizen of the world, like something like Spanish or Italian or so. But I mean, yeah, three is already very, very good, and it opens doors. So an advice I would give to my fellow Africans, as much as possible, introduce your kids to many languages as early as possible, because this is kind of a soft skill that they will need, and this knowledge will be even more needed in the world we are going into.
I agree, and you couldn't have said it better. My kids go to French immersion, so right now, pretty much my kids speak some level of French, and obviously, it's more of like I call them ammunition. You want to arm yourself with as much skills as possible, and of course, language is a very key component. But you kind of moved a little bit into advice, and I really believe that's very, very important, because I talk about mentorship. I talk about mentorship, how mentorship is really important for a lot of young people in, both in diaspora, African young people in diaspora, or in the motherland, or persons of African descent. But, there's so much, you can mentor. So whenever we have platforms like this, we tend to provide people with some level of advice, like these are some of the things you could start looking into. Now, there might be people who might be curious to think about international development. This is something I think I want to do. And I'm not sure, but I mean, there's still a lot of shortfall in terms of Africans who are playing in these spaces. And it's quite important, because a lot of decisions coming out from there affects the continent as a whole. So we need more decisions for Africans by Africans. So as someone who has navigated your career, lived in all these years, what would you say anyone who is, okay, high school, I'm finishing high school now, I want to go into university. What would you advise them in terms of how to position themselves, to really, I mean, you've spoken about language, but how to position themselves to be able to, get into the international development space or career as a whole?
The first advice I would give is to try to, as much as possible, gain experience, non-paid experience. Let's say to volunteer somewhere within NGO also, or to try to seek to get internships and so on. For me, I think how I managed to get into UNDP, for instance, was that I had an internship with UNDP in the DRC. So while I was finishing my degree in France, I looked for an internship in the Congo with UNDP. So which allowed me to get to know people, put this also on my CV, and then later when I applied, I knew some of the people inside. Unfortunately, the UN, I would say, is still a system where a selection is not always objective.
Yes.
So you have to, I mean, not you have to, but it's always helpful if you know someone who can guide you, or at least even tell you how to write your application and so on. And that's then as early as possible, you can have exposure to the UN through an internship or through a volunteer position. It's helpful. But generally, I would say, like, if this is really your goal and your dream, when you put your mind to it, you get opportunities. I mean, my goal was UN, but I started actually into humanitarian work. But since it's linked, the fact that I had already this international experience on my CV with a relative big organization facilitated the entrance into the UN. But I mean, it's not only UN. You can do development with NGOs.
Exactly.
There are a lot of NGOs in Europe that are looking for people who are motivated and who want to get a work experience in Africa or in other poorer countries. So and then from there you can go to the UN if your goal is UN. But I will not necessarily focus on the UN if you want to do development. Yeah, as I said, NGOs are there. African Development, for instance, African Development Bank, for instance, is a very good address to work with, and even our own countries. I mean, I always say that it's the real development will not be made by external people. So we have to develop our countries ourselves,
Yes.
and change the governance and the policy making from within. Don't wait the that the UN or the World Bank or the MFI will come to develop us. So, yeah.
I think
Or even like doing business, like when you, I even think that business has a bigger potential to develop our countries than aid or something. If you are able to employ, let's say, 5 to 10 people, you're already having an impact in your environment. When you know that out of this, from each people, like let's say 10 people depend on one person who works for you. So if you multiply it, you already impacting the lives of 100 to 200 people. If you are able to launch an enterprise in Africa and employ people. So yeah.
I agree. And I think the whole concept of trade and business as engines or catalysts for development in Africa is something that is always spoken about. And of course, there are different actors in terms of, how we can, provide sustainable employment and, support for our people. So we have the international development space, we have the trade and business, we have the activists, we have the economists, we have all of these small pieces. But the key thing is just to have that level of consciousness or awareness, which you and I seem to agree upon on how nothing happens by accident. It needs to keep being strategic and focused, while we, see the goal. But, one thing I really wanted to touch upon every time I have discussions about the homeland, motherland, or, all of this, I always want to talk about leadership, leadership in terms of the continents. Now, in your work, international development as a whole, what has been your experience in terms of how leaders are really able to, African leaders are really able to align with some of the goals of the international development actors and some of the strategies which are aimed towards, poverty reduction, poverty alleviation, and all of those pieces? What has been your experience so far?
It's a good question. My experience so far is that African leaders, or I would say, talk about the Congolese, they tend to wait that development is brought to them by those big agencies, and there is not much initiative coming from African leaders on that. So even like the agendas of the development plans are set by international organizations, which is not necessarily bad. Like when you look at the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Agenda goals set by the UN. I mean, they're very comprehensive and it's good. But I would like to see our leaders to be more like taking ownership of their own development, proactive, like developing our own plans start with our own resources, and then have international actors come support our plans, not have the international actors set the plans and then we kind of follow. For instance, my experience with on the other side, with a country which has a strong leadership and a strong national identity awareness is Algeria, when I worked there. So there, for instance, yeah, they didn't like the word development because development was more like we are in a lower position and the West comes to develop us. So they banned this word from the narrative there. There it's called, they call it cooperation. It's a cooperation. So we are at the same level. Yeah, partnership, cooperation. So, and they imposed this narrative to all actors in the country, the UN, etc. And yeah, and they didn't like an approach where people come and tell them what to do and so on. So this I found very interesting and very good, and something we can learn from in our African countries.
Wow, I mean that's good education there about the Algeria model. Like I really like that mindset, and that's one of the things I talk about a lot too, even when I do international trade, where I'm more focused on some of the businesses or whatever in Canada or anywhere, like working towards like a partnership model with compatriots in Africa, not so much of one-sided where like the savior mindset, and because it's dangerous and it fits into some narratives and stereotypes which you and I have been pushing over the years to really erase that sort of thinking. It should be a partnership, collaboration with a continent filled with very young, vibrant, intelligent people, So I'm glad you actually mentioned that. And, kudos to some of the leaders in Africa who stepped up. We know the countries who've stepped up in terms of the way they approach development, who have done a lot of inward sort of, thinking and positioning themselves, whereby it's a pretty much like a level playing field, whereby, you're in a better position to negotiate the terms of whatever it is you're getting. So I think you make a good point around the fact that it shouldn't just be a one-side initiative or one-side initiation. It should be more like the African leaders, step up and say, hey, this is what we're all about. So if you want some level of partnership, we are open to having discussions with you. That way, the power balance sort of is affected. So, but now in terms of you've moved around a bit, Karis, like you talked about South Sudan, Sri Lanka. How have you managed that from a family standpoint? Because I think this is one of, sometimes we underestimate how much our careers can take a toll on our family life. It puts added pressure on us. So you've had to stay away from your, lovely kids, whom I think I met your first daughter when she was born, like in the UK and all of that, and your wife and all of that. How did you navigate that? Because it's good to know, because the international development, this is one of the key things that comes with it. If I assume,
Yeah, no, it's an issue very often for many people who are either separated or the family lives in one country and they stay in another country, which on the long term is not good for the family. I was lucky enough to have my family be with me most of the time. So when I was in when I was in Sri Lanka and so on, in Sudan, I was not yet married. When I got married, my family came with me to the UK.
yes.
We were together in Algeria, and back to the DRC, of course. The only place where I went without them was in South Sudan for 1 year and a half. So I had actually every 3 months I was allowed to go back to the DRC. So yeah, I saw them only every 3 months, which was tough. So basically, it was also one of the reasons because I quit this job and went back to the DRC. So yeah, it's everyone has his own story. You have to find a balance, but ideally, find a position, a job where you can take a family. But this is not always possible. So I would, I'll see that not to do it too long. Like 1 or 2 years, maximum 2 years of separation is manageable when you see them from time to time. But longer, I will not advise.
Mm-hmm. And kudos to your wife too, and all the women who have had to move around, helping to actualize the dreams of their husbands or their partners or whatever situation it is. So it's kudos to her and most of them, because it's sometimes they have to give up a lot. Some of them might be building careers in the other country, and next thing you come and say, hey, you know what, I got this new big gig and I'm moving now. It's more salary, or it's closer to what I've always dreamt of. But that's a sacrifice on their part. So we really have to recognize that them doing that for.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, very much, yeah. No, I'm blessed to have her at my side, and her willingness also to move with me and to kind of I would say put a career on standby and be more there for the family and raising the kids and so on, which is a challenging job. So very often we undermine it because they're not earning money, but it's even probably more challenging than what the men sometimes do.
Absolutely.
So
It's
yeah.
more challenging than working in a war-torn zone.
Yeah, yeah. And without them doing it, we wouldn't have the strength sometimes to perform outside, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. And I think it's one of those things where, you know, especially the African context, where family structure is very important for us, you know, both at the nuclear level and extended level. So we always face that conundrum where we're trying to balance priorities and needs, you know, because we understand how if you're not getting it right here, then it might be really challenging. So you know, extended family, uncles, aunties, and all of these pieces. So all of these are connected in terms of helping you stay stable, you know, both from
Yeah.
and from
And the stability is everything, you know.
It's everything.
You have to have the stability, yeah.
Yes. And you are there saving people. So it's like people say, how can you save people when you've not saved yourself? So you need to be the right frame of mind to be able to save people, if I might use that word, or do things to support people or improve their livelihoods. Yes. So just to start rounding up a little bit, what would I mean, this might be a very difficult question. What next for you? Like, I know you right now, you're in this job, you're loving it, and it's not so much of like, oh, would you be applying for another job? But is there some pieces of next step achievement you want to, you know, you're thinking, you know what, I've been thinking, I really at one point, hopefully I want to get some experience in Asia, or I probably want to set up an NGO someday. Like what next for Karis?
I think the next step would be to either probably, yeah, the next step will be, I mean, it's a difficult question, yeah. So that's why I'm hesitating a bit. But I think the next step, my next calling would be a private sector. Private sector in the sense of having my own enterprise and being my own boss, more or less. Either doing some consultancy type of work, or I'm looking at, for instance, agriculture here in DRC, to setting up a company exploiting, producing, and selling agricultural goods would be a path. Yeah, I think creating riches that benefit more people, many people, and being my own boss. So I think that's the next step. It would be either this way, or perhaps more a way where I see myself supporting government structures, not necessarily entering myself into politics and so on, but I see myself, for instance, advising politicians or government or president or whatever, in how to shape policies, something like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. So I mean, it's great how you've made an impact in the past. You're making an impact in the present, and you're already strategizing on how to make an impact in the future. That's fantastic.
I mean, yeah, it's a dream, you know, like you have to dream big, and
absolutely.
and
the dreams turn to reality. The first thing is, if you can't conceive it, then it can't be reality. But you already you know, you have everything it takes and more to really get to that level you want to, or really complete the story. You started the story, so you just wanted to, you know, this is what I need to do to end my story, and know that, you know what, I've had a fulfilling career, I've had a fulfilling journey, and, you know, I can, you know, raise my hands up like, you know what, I really did great. So it's exciting. I'm really looking forward to hearing whenever that kicks off, and, you know, and hopefully
let's have a new conversation in 5 to 10 years and see how far I got.
Exactly. That's great. So is there any other thing you want to tell our audience in terms of advice, inspiration, or anything before, you know, we end the show?
Yeah, perhaps two things. I mean, I liked when you said that wherever you put your mind to, you can get. Yeah, and I want to stress this point. So really, the mindset is everything. Whatever you dedicate yourself towards and put your mind on, this will become your reality. And you have to get rid of destructive thoughts and doubts and be really confident in yourself, even if there are no elements that could indicate that you're going to reach your goals. But I think we have a force within us that paves the way. But we have to trust, we have to believe, and even the Bible says, I mean, believe is everything. Faith. Now in the Bible, they talk about faith, which is a form of belief in what you have not seen. Yeah, and that's everything. We have this imagination, so let's dream big. Let's aim for big things, and it will come. And the second point, I think, would encourage the diaspora to invest in Africa. I mean, Africa is a kind of an El Dorado. There's everything needs to be built, especially when I see the DRC. There's so much to do in terms of development or changing the environment, and this creates opportunities for entrepreneurs. I see entrepreneurship as someone who solves problems and gets paid for it. So there's so many problems in Africa, so that you can become very rich if you solve them and get paid for it. So yeah, encourage people. I know it can be scary to come back to Africa, but I mean, it's our homeland, and there are many things to do. There's a lot of money to be made here. You just have to find the right entry point and the right people to surround you with. But I see it especially here in Africa. We have a big diaspora from Lebanon and in India, Pakistan, and these guys come here and make tons of money. And while we Africans are, I don't know, we dream of going outside while we sit on the gold pot in our countries. So yeah, encourage my brothers and sisters to come back and to do something here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. What a positive note to really, end this session. I've been speaking to Karis Musako. Karis is an international development expert with, international experience, global experience, a change maker, someone who is creating impact, someone who is really providing support for our people, in the continent, and who has really left the comfort of, where he used to live in Germany, in the UK, and all of that, to go back to, DRC and, see all the wonderful things he's doing. So it's really a pleasure to have you here, Karis. And I really hope at some point we'll come back to continue your story. And I'm sure a lot of our audience of viewers have actually been inspired by your story today, because it's great. I'm blown away, and I love that. I love just everything I just heard the last 45 minutes or so. So thank you very much for joining us today, Karis.
Thank you, Ken, and good luck on your journey. And for Viewpoint, I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I think it will make headways. It will change the mindset of many people. Great, continue like this.
Great, thank you so much, Karis. So everyone, don't forget to comment, leave your comment on what you think. Don't forget to like and share. Follow us on Instagram, Kenneth Ogozie, Facebook the same, YouTube, and Twitter as well. And stay tuned for more content, much more inspiring content from Viewpoint, and to listen to all these change makers and people who are doing big stuff in the continent, in diaspora, and of course, overall as persons of African descent. So thank you for joining us, viewers, and looking forward to coming back here to speak more on very informative and inspiring topics. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.